today, the big three automakers released sales numbers for 2023. GM reported a 14% increase from 2022. Ford sales were up 7%, but for Stellantis, American sales actually fell by 1%.
That's right, and along with those lower sales, Stellantis announced this week that it would not be taking part in the upcoming Chicago Auto Show, and it's going to reassess the Detroit show later in the year. And happening in the background, the UAW continues its push to unionize auto companies across the country.
So a lot of headlines today in the auto world. Joining us to help break them down are Wayne State Professor of Management, Merrick Masters, as well as the Editor-in-Chief of Headlight.News, Paul Eisenstein. Thank you both for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for having me.
So you used to pretty much live here for a while. We haven't seen you as things have calmed down a little bit since the UAW strike ended. But not long after it ended, Merrick, we started to hear about efforts to unionize other plants in the country, particularly in the South, where they haven't organized before. This has been attempted before. How is it going now in light of the UAW's wins?
Well, it's a much more active and public campaign on the part of the UAW than it has been before, and the strategy is much different. It's more of a bubble-up strategy than a top-down helicopter strategy that I used to say, in which they'd fly in organizers and try and stimulate interest. This, they're really relying on people from in the work sites themselves to come to them and say, this is what we'd like, this is how we want to do it. And I think their strategy is much different and will be aided by some legal changes. So there's a lot going on, most of it behind the scenes, subterranean. But I would imagine that things are going to start breaking more openly within the next 2 months.
And Paul, do you think that the confidence that we're seeing as far as being more out front is a result of how we saw things end with the strike?
Yeah, I think Shawn Fain has felt really good about what they were able to achieve in the strike. They changed the rules, as we all talked about for weeks, and it worked. He surprised a lot of folks, got a lot of money, got some rule changes, and now he's looking to do the same sort of thing. It's certainly driven by his energy and personality. The question is whether that will be enough to break through. The automakers have certain limits. The non-union automakers have some limits on what they can do to oppose a union. They still have a lot of ways that they can reach out to workers and say, hey, come on guys, we work real well together without it, and here are the negatives if you do unionize. So I think it's still going to be hard. I wouldn't expect to see the transplants, as we often call them, across the board unionized. I think, Merrick, you'd probably agree with me. I think there are a couple plants that have a shot at it. Volkswagen came close in 2 votes before, and Tesla, where they have a long history of real problems at the plant, particularly in California. I would bet that if any plant unionizes, it's going to be that one of the 2 U.S. plants operated by Tesla.
What do you make of these sales numbers? We heard a lot from the big three executives throughout the strike season, if we can call it that. And then at least for Ford and GM, sales were pretty good considering the costs and the strike. So what should we make of that?
That's pretty striking, pardon the pun, but they seem to have been able to build up inventories before the strike. So they weren't hit quite as bad as they might have been by losing production. Plus, remember, this wasn't the usual strike where the entire company shut down. We saw select plants, and some of the most important plants were the ones they hit relatively late, and by that, forcing the companies to give in. So that's why I think that they did pretty well. The question is, how much better would the American automotive industry have done, and those manufacturers in particular, if they hadn't had a strike? It tells you that there is real pent-up demand after the heavy COVID pandemic and the semiconductor shortage.
And we talked about Stellantis making the decision not to participate in the Chicago Auto Show. What do you make of that, Mayor?
Well, I think it's part of a good business strategy to look at these kinds of shows and whether they're worth the investment. I'm certain that their executives, after the labor negotiations were settled, said, we've got to make up for this some way, and we want to see some cost cutting. And let us know what you can put on the chopping block. And we expect to zero budget everything. And you're going to have to justify everything. And we've got other shows to put and we've got other parts of our business to put it in. And I think that's basically what they've said, what Stellantis said when they made this announcement. It doesn't surprise me, and I'm certain there will be other cuts forthcoming. These large corporations, you know, having studied businesses for a long period of time, I can tell you, they're like government. There is a lot of waste.
Yeah.
And they can make cuts. They can make 5, 10, 15% cuts without it cutting the bone. But they've got to be selective in where they make those cuts. And I think they're going to look at show as something that is a ripe target.
Paul, you had a response?
Yeah, if you look at what's been happening the last few years, we've seen auto shows way cut back. Detroit used to have 3 days of press events, and the halls were filled. They had to fill downstairs I still call it Kobo, to be able to fit everybody in. Manufacturers were limited in how much space they could have, and now it's like, guys, take as much as you want. Auto shows are expensive, and the big question that all the manufacturers are asking today, does it make sense? Do they sell cars for me, and at what cost? Remember, it can be $1 million, $2 million, $5 million to set up an exhibit and then hold a news conference adds more to it. You've seen a number of automakers either cut back or entirely drop out of auto shows. A lot of the Europeans have cut back, at least in major shows like Detroit and Chicago. The LA show 2 months ago had less than half of the automakers they had a year before, and probably a third as many automakers as they had pre-COVID. You're going to see auto shows continue to decline, and the organizers are going into a panic mode trying to figure out what to do, as we're now hearing they're talking about moving possibly back to January.
So what's
here
the
in
deal
Detroit.
with that? It hasn't been in the fall that long. We were all there last year. Didn't have to wear a jacket. It was nice. Why bring it back into the dead of the winter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't have a chance. I saw Rod Alberts, who is the head of the Detroit Auto Dealers Association today. He really wasn't talking about this, but privately some of the people are sounding it out. I don't think it's been locked into place, but I think they believe that January is more effective. Whether the manufacturers will buy into that, I talked with somebody from Hyundai. I was at the North American Car and Truck of the Year celebration today, the announcement, and I know that at least one influential person at Hyundai was going, too cold.
Sure.
Okay, so there's a little bit of concern. At least we know that.
Yeah.
Okay, something else they mentioned, these companies talking about EV sales and the fact that that's actually been helping them. Is that something that you see continuing?
Well, I think the future is EV. There's no doubt about it. It's just the pace of transition. And globally, we're behind. So I think that these companies, particularly GM and Ford, have a lot of catching up to do. And it's important to remember that the center of gravity in the auto industry is changing globally. It's no longer US-centric. It will be more Chinese-centric, India-centric, and even European Union-centric. And these companies, Stellantis has an advantage over the others in that regard.
It was fascinating to see this week that as we looked at the fourth quarter, not just the full year, in which Tesla remained the largest EV manufacturer in the world, for the fourth quarter, it was BYD, a Chinese company, and they are catching up quickly. And they're not even operating in North America. They're only primarily in Europe and China, with a little bit in some third world markets, Latin America and Asia. So certainly the US has to keep up, because the money is going to focus on development for the rest of the world. We can try to say, oh no, we're going to stick with gas vehicles, diesel vehicles in North America. It doesn't work that way. We are not controlling what's happening around the world anymore. And the reality is, it's going to be choppy. That was the comment made by the CFO over at GM a few weeks ago. Yes, growth will be choppy, but it will continue to grow. And the results of the North American Car, Truck, and Utility Vehicle of the Year underscored that. Out of 9 finalists, 5 were all electric, 2 more, actually 3 more, were at least available in hybrid or plug-in, or also an optional EV option this year. Okay. So we are definitely seeing the trend move that way. There are issues that consumers are worried about, but they will be addressed. There'll be more chargers, batteries will be longer range, they'll be lower cost. And as that happens, I really do expect the future is all electric.
And we are already starting to see that happen. So much to talk to. We can talk about it all night. Paul Eisenstein and Merrick Masters, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.